Hey everybody, it's Daniel Vitalis from WildFed and Surthrival, here for my first AMA. Thank you for all the incredible questions you've sent along. I've selected out just 7 at random. I'm gonna answer these ones today, but in future episodes, I'll answer more questions. So if you don't hear your question answered now, if it's not being answered in this AMA, tune into the next one because we might tackle it there. And please keep your questions coming on Facebook, Instagram, and anywhere else you reach out to me on social media. My first question comes in from Joy Light on Facebook. Joy, it's really good to hear from you. It's been a very long time. My sons really want to know what bear tastes like. They saw an episode of you hunting a bear and they wanted to eat some ever since. Joy, bear meat is fantastic. It's maybe one of the most underrated meats in the woods. It's a very mild meat. So it has almost none of the gamey flavors that sometimes get associated with venison or other wild animals. And its fat is probably one of the most valuable things that comes off of the animal. It's just so calorie dense. You know, all my Native American friends are always after that bear fat for ritual purposes. People I know who've got skin problems are often after bear fat because it heals their eczema or their psoriasis. It's a very sought after food for foodies. It's really great to cook with. It's great to do baked confections with. It can be used to make tamales or anywhere you'd use lard. So it's just a wonderful, clean olive oil-like fat. It's mostly oleic acid. And then the meat itself does have to be cooked through all the way due to the risk of trichinosis, because bears have a tendency to scavenge a bit, and so they can ingest trichinosis, and then whoever ingests them can also get it. In fact, I do know somebody who has trichinosis from eating bear meat, and they'll carry that the rest of their lives. It doesn't really affect them now. But bear meat's flavor is mild and delicious. It's something like beef meets pork with the mildness of pork meat, because beef, I think, has a kind of a gamey flavor. So if you can ever get your hands on any, it's wonderful. All right, the next question comes from Tim Winders on Facebook. He's asking, what are your thoughts on ice baths, saunas, and infrared light therapy for recovery and health maintenance? Tim, awesome question. These things have become so incredibly popular in recent years, such that, you know, I know on my own social media feeds, I would just see endless offerings for ice baths in the last, I'd say, a couple years, but that's really winding down. My impression is a little bit of research came out, a lot of influencers jumped on board, and the idea got so exciting, everybody started thinking they needed to own a cold plunge. Now, how and why I think these things are beneficial. The use of the sauna goes way, way back. I think this is something that's not going away. The use of cold plunge is obviously ancient. The use of infrared light therapy, that one's new. What I think all these 3 things do, though, is they replicate things from our natural environment. So ice bath mimics the extremes of cold that we would experience living a natural, nature-based life. Sauna replicates the heat that we would experience living in the natural world. And infrared light therapy mimics the infrared we would receive from 2 places. One, of course, is the light of the sun, which has an infrared light component. And then obviously being exposed to fires just about all the time in the ancient and just pre-modern world. I mean, just go back a couple hundred years and everybody's got a fire in their home all the time. So you're always getting those infrared rays. I watch my dogs lay out in the sun or lay by the fire, just absorbing that infrared. It's very, very healing. I don't think the infrared light therapy thing is going to stick around forever. I think it's in a bit of a fad phase. I think we're very excited about LED lights in the technological space, and so people are trying to find ways all the time to monetize that. I think that's probably a bit of a fad, and I think the ice bath is a bit of a fad as well. I think people will continue to do cold therapy, but I think that this era of, you know, excitement around the ice bath is probably going to be short-lived. That's my guess. But I think that the sauna is here to stay. It's been around a very long time, and it's the most enjoyable of these 3 things. You actively feel pleasure in the sauna that you don't really feel under a red light, or definitely don't feel in an ice bath. So if it was me and I had to pick one of those 3 for my home, I already have picked. It's the sauna. I've had one for years. I'll probably always have one. Ice bath would be cool to have, but I don't think it's that necessary if you expose yourself to cold regularly. I'm out barefoot in the snow. every day right now, going to grab my firewood. I'm exposing myself to cold. That said, if you want to utilize that cold therapy, I think it's incredible. Infrared light therapy, I think, has benefits too, but I think those are maybe a little overblown. We'll have to just see in 10 years, is it still around? This question is from Brian Gilman on Instagram. Hey, Brian, great question here. What is your advice on eating a healthy diet on a limited budget, especially when I can't afford grass-fed organic meat or supplements? How important is diet compared to other aspects of health and rewilding? Brian, I appreciate this question, and I know you're around a lot on Instagram, so good to connect with you here. And I just want to support you, man, and say that I think that what's really important is eating a whole food diet. Right now, what's going on with humanity is we're eating more and more processed food. We're consuming more and more plastic. We're consuming more and more pharmaceuticals. And I think that the average person, even in the health food scene, who eats a lot of, let's say, organic, paleo snack food, a lot of processed foods that are labeled organic or made to appear healthy, I think those people would be healthier on an inorganic whole foods diet than they would eating the organic, grass-fed meat snacks and all of that. That's just my personal opinion and what I've seen over the years. I think that diet is second probably only to exercise, and only barely second to exercise when it comes to like what's most important for building robust health. I think that if you have a limited budget, let's say you begin with saying, I'm going to eat as much whole food from the supermarket, regular commercial whole food, as I can. Whole vegetables, whole grains, whole meats, a good, well-rounded omnivorous diet. You want to look down at your plate and see a good portion of protein, a good portion of high fiber, low-calorie vegetables or greens or salad, and you want to see some kind of complex carbohydrate that's going to fuel you through your day. That's my opinion. I think all that should be dressed lightly in fats, probably the fats that you cooked with or the fats that you dress your vegetables or salad with. And for me, that's a lot of olive oil and things like that. So I think that people tend to want to go to all these extremes and make you think you need all these different things. That said, if you can afford to go to the supermarket, you can probably go to the farmer's market too. So I'd start connecting in with folks who grow food and trying to find better deals on that produce by getting closer to the source and cutting out any of the middlemen. Because when you buy organic at the supermarket, obviously there's a huge markup, but you can bypass a lot of that going direct. Same for meat producers, and you're always going to save by buying in bulk. So I'd recommend you'd spend $150 on a chest freezer, and then you start filling that with, let's say, a quarter of a cow or a whole lamb or half a pig or a whole bunch of chickens, something like that, that you can buy direct from a producer so you can still get that grass-fed organic food. I think supplements come in last here. They're obviously a bit of a luxury item. If you first things first, you got to have good quality food. That said, a lot of the great supplements, like if you look at my company, Surthrival, most of the supplements I produce, you could go out and harvest in nature yourself. So if you do not have the resources to buy supplements, you can simply make your own. And actually that would be very beneficial to your rewilding process as well, because that's going to put you out in nature where those things grow. Okay, next question from Damien, DJ333 on Instagram. What do you feel are the most important Surthrival skills given the current events? Damien, I looked at your question a few times this morning, thinking to myself, is he asking about survival skills like out in nature, or is he talking about more like social or digital or built environment skills? Because you mentioned current events. So I'm going to kind of go both directions real quick. From a survival perspective, classically in wilderness survival, we learn about these four critical things. They're shelter, water, fire, and food, typically in that order. Now, my opinion is that most of us don't have time to become bushcraft or survival masters, and a lot of us don't really have the interest either. So what we need to do is figure out what's our area of interest and develop that skill so that as we develop friends in that culture, we have all of the skills covered by our community. So my particular interest is in food. I can start fires. I know where to find water. I can build some rudimentary shelter, but I've really done the deep dive into food. I have other friends who've done the deep dive on fire, making fire in primitive ways, knowing how to produce fire, produce birth coals, basically birth fire off the landscape. What a cool skill to have. I've got a little bit of it, but that's not my area of focus. For me, food is the big one, and I think that it gives me a skill that I carry around in my head. It's not something I've stored in 5-gallon buckets in my basement for an apocalypse. It's something I take with me so that I can be useful anywhere that I go. So on the wilderness survival side, food for me is crucial, but I think you pick the skill that you're most interested in. It could be napping stone into arrowheads, or building bows, or learning fiber arts so you can build nets and bags and baskets, or whatever your interest is. Develop that. But I think it's good for everybody to develop a nature-based skill, something ancestral, to connect them back to the ancient world and to their ancestry, and to connect them today to the actual earth, to have a reason to go into nature, to gather materials to do the thing that you do. So for me, that's wild animals, that's wild plants, that's wild fungi, that's wild protists. Those are the things that I'm out there harvesting and bringing back. But for you, it could be, wood, or tinder to make fire, or whatever it might be. But I want to add another piece to that, which is, I think right now, given current events, as you mentioned in your question, it's crucial that we develop media literacy. Right now, what I see happening is we are essentially taking a core fundamental teaching that our culture was based on. You could basically boil it down to the teachings of Jesus Christ. We've taken, that's our sort of was the central tenet of our culture. And we've divided those teachings in half. And one political wing takes one half of the teaching, and the other political faction takes the other half of the teaching, and then they argue over which side is right, and the two aren't whole unless they're put back together. Another way to say that, and something I've said many times over the years, is when you're flying on a plane, would you get on a plane that only had a left wing? Or would you get on a plane that only had a right wing? You need both wings for flight. So you don't want to get corralled into an echo chamber on one side or the other. And that's what's happening in media right now. And I don't just mean in news media, I mean in all forms of social media as well. It's very obvious from the outside, we're all getting corralled. So we need to have that media literacy to be able to understand what the media that we are consuming is trying to get us to think or feel, because we want to be able to have a more neutral, objective perspective, and we need to be able to push that divisiveness out of ourselves and away from ourselves. So media literacy is really critical. And then one more component I want to add, again, in relationship to current events, but this kind of is useful anytime, that would be spiritual discernment. Because there are forces at work right now that, if you zoom out, I think it's really clear, don't like humanity. Want to see us infertile, want to see us not reproducing, want to see us unhealthy and sick and poor and fighting. And it takes spiritual discernment sometimes to tell who is who in that fight and where people side, because so many of those perpetrators are in disguise. And it takes spiritual discernment to see that. So physical survival skills, media survival skills, spiritual survival skills. We kind of need all of those, in my opinion. Okay, next question. This is a fun one from BMXIon22 on Instagram. Is declining fertility and reproduction linked to people feeling trapped by modern society, similar to how zoo animals reproduce less in captivity? Well, some zoo animals reproduce less in captivity, but I don't think that's what's going on with us. But I think it's a cool question. I like how you framed it. Think about an animal that won't reproduce. I think tigers are that way, right? They don't reproduce well in the zoo environment. So the question kind of is, hey, we're in a zoo environment, and we are. I think we're actually more in a factory farm environment, not really a zoo. A zoo is meant to replicate the environment that animal naturally lives in. Our environment doesn't do that. It's more like a factory farm. A zoo is made for the observation of the animals, but the animals aren't expected to be produce or produce anything. That's not exactly how our culture works. Ours is more like a farm in that we're expected to create produce, with our labor and our taxation. The zoo environment is designed to keep the animal healthy and alive as long as possible by reproducing its natural diet to the degree that can be done, and the conditions of its environment. Ours is not like that. It's more like a farm. There isn't a lot of concern about our health here, despite all the rhetoric around it. So I don't think we're really in a zoo environment. I think we're in a farm environment. But that said, I think really why we're seeing declines in fertility, there's several things going on, but one of the most major factors is probably petrochemical exposure, which has damaged our endocrine function significantly. Even those of us who are trying to live a healthy lifestyle, we're exposed constantly. And so I think that's one of the major features, but I don't think it's the stack and pack nature of our civilization, because if you just consider pornography, human beings are really comfortable, doing the baby making act in public. So that's not keeping us from it. I think it has more to do with our chemical exposure. Question 6 from Food Forest, Florida. How do you reconcile faith in eternal life with a responsibility to care and preserve the natural world we live in now? It's a cool question, Food Forest, Florida. Thank you. I think you're asking it because we have this sort of false dichotomy that's developed, that it's like a people of faith, or I think in particular, we're probably talking about Christendom. There's just almost a sense of well, this world's temporary, so why take care of it? I don't agree with that philosophy at all. The book of Revelation 11:18 talks about a time when those who are destroying the earth will themselves be destroyed. Here's kind of how I think of this. When I hear people talking about us going to colonize Mars, I think to myself, why? We're not ready. We're not even taking care of this planet yet. If we go to Mars, we'll do to that planet what we've done to this planet. Obviously, it's like somebody in a relationship who has a difficulty, let's say, with intimacy, or can't express their feelings, or is always creating strife and fighting in their relationship, or is adulterous or cheating, or whatever it might be, some problem in their relationship. If they don't heal that, they're going to go into their next relationship and just kind of do the same thing. So what we have to do is actually stop and work on ourselves. So similarly, I don't think human beings are ready to go to other planets if we can't take care of the planet we're on. So that's my first component. And then the second component will be this. If I knew that I was living in a home that I wasn't going to be in forever, and I planned to upgrade to another home, that wouldn't give me license to badly treat the home that I'm living in now. In fact, the way I believe you earn the next house is by how well you steward the one you're in now. So if you take very good care of that home, you show yourself approved to move into the next home, to upgrade. I think the way that we've treated our world is shameful, and I think that it's a cop-out to say none of it matters because there's a heavenly realm or another spiritual dimension that we would enter. I think that we'll be held accountable for how we've taken care of this earth. Question 7, how do you maintain a positive outlook in a modern world filled with existential challenges? What techniques, practices, or spiritual insights can you give us to help us navigate today's world with grounded optimism? That's from Ryan Cornett on Instagram. Great question, Ryan. For me, if you're a spiritual person, I think prayer is really crucial. If you're more of a secular person, maybe it's meditation. I kind of like both of those things, meditation, prayer, and I'd say contemplation as well. Those three things, and maybe mixing in fasting as well. And I don't necessarily mean fasting from food, but being able to take breaks from things that are maybe even good, but can be obsessive enough to take you away from higher principles that you would like to meditate on, contemplate, or pray about. It can be taking a break from food. It could be taking a break from your social media. It could be taking a break from any number of things that are taking up a lot of your time or attention. But I think having a solid meditation practice, a time where I described it recently as, your mind is like a dog you've brought into your home, and you're trying to get your dog to learn how to do certain things like sit, or go to its place and hold place. You're telling your mind to sit. You're telling your mind to go to its place and to hold place. And if it can't do that and it gets up and runs off of place, and you want to send it back, you just kind of gently guide it back, tell it to sit again, and keep doing that. Over time, you train your brain to be a little bit more under your conscious control, or your mind, I guess maybe. I think without that skill, We are very easily swayed, particularly emotionally, by all of the media around us and whatever the narrative that we're most seeing is. Prayer, I think, is crucial. It shows us that we have a way of affecting the world. It empowers us. Prayer empowers us to impact the world in ways and in places that we normally couldn't impact. Think about how, let's say with Instagram. When Instagram started, you had suddenly the ability to send a DM off to almost anybody in the world. People you never would have had the ability to communicate with in the past. Now, there's a chance they might see your message, right? Well, prayer is like your way of affecting anyone or anything in the world. And you can do it from anywhere in the world. So it's a very powerful tool, not just for trying to get the things you want, but actually to help to steer and move the world in the direction that's best spiritually. Other practices, I would say being very careful what you let into your mind. So if you're consuming garbage, gossip, fear porn, sexual porn, those kind of things into your mind will be filled with those things. Out of your mouth, you'll speak those things. In the world, you'll act out those things. Those things will start to steer the direction of your ship. So it's important that the things you're putting into your mind are beautiful things, good things, things that lead to edification. I'm not just talking about knowledge either. I'm talking about all kinds of aspects of anything from scripture to good teaching, to sound doctrine, to philosophically sound reasoning, to happy stories, to people doing things to edify and care for others. Those kind of stories going into our mind, we then act out in the world, and we become edifying to the world. But if we're putting in toxic information all the time, we ourselves become agents of chaos. And now we're actually contributing to the problem. So that's the biggest thing. The scam is, it's okay if you find out what's really going on in the world, because if you study that stuff enough, you just become an agent of it anyway. So you have to be really careful when we want to dig into a conspiracy. They're real, right? There's all kinds of them that are coming out now. But if we spend all our time like, what's the enemy doing? What's the enemy doing? What's the enemy doing? Well, now we're in that toxic arena all the time, and we become toxified by it. So I love this biblical idea of being wise as serpents, but gentle as doves. It's okay to put some of our energy in that direction, but we need to make sure that the preponderance of our energies are directed towards things that are edifying and good. Otherwise, we ourselves become agents of chaos. So those are my thoughts, everybody. Thank you so much for sending in your questions. I really look forward to doing more of this. It feels very interactive, and I really appreciate that. I'm all the way up here in the northeast corner of Maine, where it can be difficult to interact with a lot of people who I share ideas and values with. So thank you for reaching out to me. Keep your questions coming. I'll keep answering them in an upcoming AMA.